You think you know why you're stuck in business, but you're probably blind to the one thing that's holding you back. I want to invite you to stop wasting time on the wrong fixes, solve the real problem, and everything changes. Welcome to the Superhuman Selling podcast. Today, I am joined by Kevin StClergy, author, coach, and creator of the Beyond Blind Blaming Framework, which helps entrepreneurs, leaders, and high performers stop wasting time on the wrong fixes and start solving what's actually broken in their business. Kevin has helped thousands uncover the hidden obstacles that are keeping them stuck, whether that's identity conflicts, emotional load, or simply solving the wrong problem. So, in this episode, we're going to explore why most people aren't actually failing at sales, they're succeeding at the wrong things. We'll dive into the real barriers that prevent clarity, confidence, and breakthrough results. And along the way, Kevin will share frameworks and practical strategies we can all take back into our businesses, our teams, and our own lives. Kevin, welcome to the podcast. I'm excited for this conversation. I know that what you do and the work you do is beyond just the scope of sales, but I think today we're going to really lean into the sales world, sales professionals, entrepreneurs, and how your discoveries and your framework, the Beyond Blind Blaming framework, how it applies to help us grow our sales and get to the real root of the issue if we're not actually hitting the results that we want. So I'm excited to dive in with you.
So am I. Thanks for having me because we all have to sell if we're in business for ourselves and or whatever we're doing. So I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, I love it. Well, let's get into it. What I'd love to hear from you first is why do you think that so many people think that they're bad at sales when the real issue is actually that they're solving the wrong problem?
I think that this is where we go into going deeper. So they say they're bad at sales. But when you say something like that, to me, it goes a little deeper to mindset. It's the story they're telling themselves. Guess what? If you keep telling yourself you're bad at sales, you're going to be bad at sales. But if you keep telling yourself, well, maybe maybe it's just something I need to learn better. And I have a great story is when I first started my career, and it was in the medical field. But it's kind of a retail medical field because it was based. I'm an audiologist by training, believe it or not. That's a hearing imbalance specialist. And we diagnose hearing loss and balance issues. I don't do that anymore because now I do more business stuff. But back in the day when I first started, I got out of grad school with a master's degree. Went to work for a gentleman who was really good at bringing people through the door. And you'd think as a medical professional, you would diagnose a hearing loss and people would say, yeah, I want the hearing aids, give them to me. Well, doesn't always happen that way. We're dealing with a problem that nobody thinks they have, and we were selling something that nobody really wants. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, man, I can't wait to get my hearing aids. Then I'm off to the knee doctor and the heart doctor. It's going to be an awesome day. So I saw like 100 people in the first 2 weeks, and I'll let you guess how many hearing aids you think I sold out of 100 people. He was really good. It was a lot of fun. It was very busy. There was a lot of people needed help, but guess how many hearing aids I sold?
Imagining it was not a great number.
No, it was one.
One out of a
And so I
hundred.
One
Wow.
out of 100. So I
Wow.
called my dad, and I was a little bit more colorful than I'll be on your podcast. Was like, Dad, I've completely effed up. I just spent, almost $100,000 on something I can't do. And he's like, oh, buddy, it's your sales process. I guarantee it. Now, my dad's been in sales for years. He just recently retired, but he was like, it's your sales process. And I got offended. I'm like, Dad, I'm not a salesman. I'm a medical professional. I diagnose a medical problem. And he's like, yeah, but you're taking money for something. And whether you call it a counseling process, a sales process, there's something wrong with you and your process. And I would take that a step further with blind blaming is it's not you, it's the process. Even though sometimes when sales aren't going well, we do tend to blame ourselves, which is my biggest problem with the self-help industry right now, because too many times we're pointing fingers at some things that are out of our control, which we'll get into shortly as we keep going. But I did what he said. I was like, okay, well, maybe I can find some other people that are really good at this. So I started traveling the country with some very successful people who had built very successful practices. And when they made their recommendations, patients listened and said yes. And I started to figure out, maybe I can do this, and maybe it is my process. So I was even recording people with their presentations and how they built trust and showed the patient that they actually cared. And I think the same thing applies In a sales process, if you ask great questions, the best questions, and you show someone that you care by asking those questions instead of just pitching, then everything changes. And we ended up getting my acceptance rate, is what I used to call it, because I hated the words close rate. But my acceptance rate was in the 70s and 80s pretty consistently once I got that process down. Now, it took me a year, but again, I was blaming me, I was blaming the education, I was blaming the patients, but the real problem was my process.
Interesting. So I would love to have you distill and break down the blind blaming framework, because when I initially hear it, to me it sounds like, and I think that this is wrong based on what you just shared, to me it sounded like stop blaming everything outside of you and start actually taking ownership and accountability. What I'm hearing you say is that a lot of times we point the fingers at ourselves, maybe unnecessarily, when there are some things outside of us that are the root of the issue. So can you help me understand this? Help me think about this the right way. And is it a matter of us needing to take more accountability and responsibility, or looking outside of ourselves at things that maybe aren't so much things that are in our control? Tell me more about that.
Yeah, we'll get to it.
Yeah.
So the book, Beyond Blind Blaming, is broken into three sections: awareness, and then the RCD method, and then transformation. Those are the three major sections of the book. Awareness is just, as you said, make me more aware of blind blaming. A lot of us don't know we're doing it, especially in sales, because a salesperson is really good about blaming the customer. Marketing, which is my favorite, especially owners when they're having trouble with their sales team, and the sales team says it's marketing, marketing says it's sales team. It's just back and forth. And we don't, it's just a habit that we get into, and sometimes we're not even aware that we're doing it. So if you've got an unresolved problem that keeps popping up, I always like to say or ask people, do you ever get tired of solving the same problem? And then I stop talking and they're like waiting for more, and then they get it. And they're like, oh, right. Yeah. Well, if you're solving the same problem over and over again with different things, then you're probably suffering from blind blaming because you're fixing the wrong problem. It's not that people are failing at solving their problems. They're just solving the wrong problem perfectly. And once we find out what the real problem is, everything changes. And so it's blind blaming is blind because we can't see what's actually going on. And it's blaming because we instinctively have to assign fault somewhere, even sometimes to ourselves. But the story that I like to share, and I'll do it briefly, is when I was the whole story in the book is when I was 10 years old. I was a phenomenal baseball player. And for those of you who don't know anything about baseball, at a 550 batting average, that's really good. It's not even good, it's great. Babe Ruth in his heyday had a 394. So we went to work on my mindset. My dad started pushing me hard. Hey, we got to prepare you for college ball and high school ball. And maybe one day you can play in the pros. And that's what it became my life. And we worked really hard in the off season. We worked hard on the swing, mindset, everything else. And I was ready. But when I stood up to bat at 11 years of age, something was different. I started swinging and missing. And I ended up striking out every single time for the entire season. I literally went from hero to zero. I went from a baseball star to a nothing and a nobody. And you can probably guess what I heard from the stands, from the parents. Come on, kid, play to win this time. Keep your head in the game. My dad would lecture me on the way home about my attitude and everything else I did wrong with my swing. And the next year, I'd only played 2 games, and I had had enough of baseball because eventually started blaming myself because it was my first experience with complete failure. And then I quit. And 2 weeks after I quit, at a fluke eye exam, we figured out what the real problem was. I couldn't see the ball. The doc said, hey, sorry, kid's practically blind without glasses. But the real problem was this: the parents in my life, the adults in my life, and my parents never stopped blaming me for something that was completely out of my control. Everybody that was in my sphere of influence thought they knew what was going on. And they started blind blaming. And it took somebody from completely outside, an eye doctor, to figure out what the real problem was. And so this gets into three fatal flaws of blind blaming. The first is there's these heuristics or cognitive biases that we all have that help us make decisions faster, and they can be really good, but they can also be really bad because they can keep us from seeing what's really going on or possible solutions. And the first is called the availability bias. So when we're struggling with sales and it pops into our head, well, if I just had more leads, I'd be fine. So we start blaming marketing. Or if I would just get better leads, which is my favorite, then I could close more people. We start going, whatever pops into our head first is the logical thing that is actually going on, but it's usually wrong. And it's called the availability bias. The second fatal flaw is once we have that availability bias, we have that one thing that we think is the problem, we become a treasure hunter for information to back up our initial thought. And that's called confirmation bias. And to the point where we almost ignore contradictory evidence of something else.
Mm.
That's our brain protecting us from ourselves. And then the third fatal flaw is when you're so busy trying to fix the wrong problem and focused on the wrong thing, it's impossible for you to see solutions. In fact, this has been proven over and over again. There's this book called The Structure of Scientific Revolution. I reference it in my book. I didn't realize it's one of the most quoted books in history. But this guy, Thomas Kuntz, he studied researchers. He got pretty annoyed that it started being applied to the business world because he really wanted it about research and research only, which is another story. But what he found is when researchers had a certain end in mind of what was going to happen when they did their experiments, everything was fine. But if they started getting results that weren't in line with what they thought was going to happen, it was almost like the data didn't exist. And they would run the study over again and over again. And they do the same thing over and over again, which we all know what that's called, insanity.
Mm.
Then the same thing happens with us. It's just human beings. It's not just for researchers, it's with us. When we think we know what's going on, we try to find all the data we can to back it up. And every little thing that happens becomes another feather in the cap to prove that we were right.
Mm.
And so to break free, we developed this thing called the RCD method, which we can get into whenever you're ready. But
Yeah.
that is blind blaming, if that helps everyone listening to understand what it is. So that's how you can become more aware.
Well, and you said something, Kevin, that just stuck with me because I'm even thinking about it in my own life. Like, we all have these repeated patterns, repeated behaviors, and whether it's the same people or different people. That's why I think, entrepreneurs, they keep hiring the same type of team and having the same type of issues again and again. And they
Yeah.
think it's got to be everyone outside of me, but it's a pattern within you, right? And so you said, are you tired? I think what you said was, are you tired of solving the same problem again and again, which obviously we can apply in our businesses or we can apply in our personal lives. Maybe someone keeps attracting the same type of partner and they think, oh, it's them. There's a pattern. And this I'm a Scorpio, so this speaks to my Scorpio self, where it's like, we gotta get you to so we know we wanna get deep into the truth, right? What's really underneath the surface. So I'd love to hear about you said it's the RCD method, is that right?
Method.
Method. I'd
Yeah.
love to hear about that because I think if someone is listening and obviously they're gonna get a little bit of it today, and then we'll direct them to where they can go deeper into your book or into your programs to learn more. But if we can actually get to the root of the issue and stop repeating the pattern, how liberating and how freeing. So, yeah, I'm all ears. I would love to hear what that is and what that
Yeah,
is.
it makes a big difference.
Yeah.
And in fact, we just the story you just told where people are hiring salespeople and none of them seem to work out. There's a story in the book about that individual. This has happened to me more than once, but there's one that sticks in my head where she just she could never get past that $750,000 mark to get to that $1 million. And using the RCD method, we got to the bottom of it, and I'll talk about it as we go through it. So R stands for reflect. And just very quickly, all you have to do is ask yourself one question. Is there something else going on that we can't see or that I can't see? Because a lot of times when you have an unresolved problem, there is.
Mm.
Now, in the book, I talk about a 5-step process. We go through 5 different areas of somebody's life and their business. We look at things like health, because a lot of times I find that the reason people are disorganized or they can't seem to get things done is because there's an underlying health issue that they weren't aware of. And it gets worse as we get older because we get used to feeling a certain way and we just think it's normal. We normalize a lot of things in our lives, including the way that we feel. And for example, we had one person who had gotten to that $1 million mark, but he was starting to struggle years ago. And his team was convinced he had ADHD because he was completely disorganized. He kept forgetting things. His employees were starting to leave. His customers were starting to leave as well because he was really poor at follow up. And then his business partner was so frustrated with him, he hired him an ADHD coach. And after about 6 months, the ADHD coach said, look, I don't think so. I think something else is going on here. I mean, you sell really well, but your follow-up's off. I don't think you need another planner or another system. I think we need to dig a little deeper. And so she sent him back to his primary care doctor, who then said, well, you suffered from ADHD your whole life. And he got a little upset. And he's like, no. And I wish people would stop telling me that because that's not what I had. I was a straight A student. I've built $1 million business. It's driving me nuts. And she's like, well, I think there's something else going on. And so she put him through a series of tests. And it turns out he had sleep apnea. He was chronically exhausted. So it doesn't matter the sales process he had, the organization that he had, the daily planner, or even an ADHD coach. He was chronically exhausted. But his team was really convinced they knew exactly what was happening with this person and it ended up being something else. And by the way, that individual was me in
Mm.
2009 or 10, somewhere in there.
Wow. Yeah.
So, and it
Mm.
cost me in my relationship at the time, but it didn't cost me the business. But once we got that fixed, my business exploded. We grew by 5 times with a successful exit in 22.
Mm.
So the next step is C, connect, because and there's other things that we can go through in the book. We don't have time today because it's a short podcast, but we look at purpose. I find that some people have lost their way. They think they're doing something they should be doing, but it's really not what they want to be doing. It doesn't light them up anymore. We look at relationships because how you do anything is how you do everything. So if you're struggling at home, you're probably going to be struggling at work, but you could also be struggling with work relationships. It's not always about personal relationships.
Mm.
We look at mindset and we call it growth, but do you have a growth mindset or a fixed mindset? People with a fixed mindset, they want feedback. They crave it. They're like, hey, tell me what I'm doing wrong so I can be better. People with a fixed mindset, they don't like feedback. They don't like recording their calls and having other people listen to them, which, by the way, I still do today. My assistant still helps me look at all my sales calls and gives me feedback on how she thinks I'm doing based on the processes that we put together. But a lot of people are nervous to do that because they're afraid that somebody's going to catch them doing something they shouldn't be, even though deep down inside they know they are.
Yeah.
And then we look at resources. Do you have the right tools to be successful? So those are the 5 areas in that reflect stage. But the next is, and there's been root cause analysis processes out there for years. There's one big problem with those root cause analysis. They only look inside. They've got everybody in their sphere of influence, which I already talked about. We know that sometimes it's physiologically impossible for you to see a different way of doing something or see the real problem. So I created a C, which stands for connect.
Mhm.
And this is where you connect with an outside coach or a mastermind group. And I like paid coaches and I like paid masterminds, not because I own them and operate them. Even before I did this, I was part of a coach. And what was interesting to me is years ago, probably 20 years ago, I guess was probably my first life coach that I hired. I asked him a question and he said, you know what? I don't know. Let me ask my coach. And I said, you have a coach? And he's like, Kevin, how many Olympic athletes do you know that won a gold medal that didn't have a coach and weren't part of a team? And that made me sit there and go, okay, yeah, you're right. So I've always had a coach and I've always been part of a mastermind every year for almost 20 years. But I've experienced a level of success that a lot of people don't. And I think it's one reason I do. But if you can't afford a coach or find a mentor, find somebody that's not stuck with your past successes, your past failures, and those of your teams. And the stuff that in the book I call the behavioral bedrock. These are all the things that have happened to us in the past that make us see a certain way or see certain things and think a certain way. So once you connect with an outside source, a lot of times they can see things you can't. Just like my doctors, the 2 medical examples I gave, or the example I promised to come back to is the woman who kept hiring salespeople, but she never could break that $750,000 mark. In our mastermind group, somebody called her out and said, you know what I think your big problem is? You're where I was 2 years ago. You haven't given yourself permission to grow. And you keep self-sabotaging yourself. You've told us about the people that you've hired in this mastermind group. You're underpaying, you're getting bad talent, and you don't really have a hiring and recruiting process. And I don't think you even realize what you're doing because you're scared that you're going to spend money on top talent and they're not going to produce. You have to give yourself permission that you deserve to grow. And once she did, within 6 months, she hit $1.2 million in sales. She made a decision. She hired the right people, paid them what they're worth, got rid of the fear, gave herself permission that she actually deserves to grow, and she did. So when you get somebody, that's connect. And then finally, D. And I've got so many stories, but D stands for decide. Once you've done the research, you've shared it with an outside source, whether it's a coach, a mastermind, or both, and then you have to make a decision to do something different. I see a lot of people that just struggle. And this seems to be the favorite takeaway from the book or my keynote speeches or even my e-courses, whatever people or however people get access to the Beyond Blind Blaming framework, they like this the most. And I had a client who was debating on, she was going to expand her business and she was debating on 2 different loans. And she's given me permission to share, by the way. And she said, Kevin, what do you think I should do? Because they keep coming back with better offers. And I just said very bluntly, well, Kayla, I think you need to make an effing decision. I didn't say effing though. I said the word. And she's like, oh, now I've worked with her for 7 years. So we have that kind of relationship. And I'm a pretty direct coach too. For those of you listening that are a coach of a client of mine, you know how direct I can be. And so she left and comes back a month later. And I always start my coaching calls with, hey, what's going well? I stopped asking people how they're doing because some people think the world is a dumpster fire. But when I say, hey, what's going well, they'll start with the good stuff. Well, on this call, Kayla said, oh, listen, you've changed my life. I'm MFDing all over the place. I mean, even my husband's noticed. I mean, I've made some mistakes, but yeah, then I just pivot, do what you said, and we're moving forward. I can't believe it. And I'm like, wait a minute, what are you talking about? MFD? And she's like, yeah, making effing decisions. I'm doing it every day and it's changed my life. And I'm like, wow, I love that. Do you mind if I use that in my book? And she's like, yeah, it's your term. I just put MFD on it. And so then at a mastermind we did a really fun one at a mastermind in Paradise in Orlando. We rented this huge mansion and we broke everybody into groups. And she comes back in her group and they're smiling. And I'm like, well, what did you guys come up with? They're like, well, we added MFD. We said if you MFD, you'll DES. So if you make effing decisions, you'll do epic, you know what?
Mm.
Look,
I love it.
we even found wine called Do Epic Stuff. So, yeah, and I was actually worried about that in the book because I actually intro it about language, and I was scared that people would get offended by the language, which some people do. But the more research I did on that, I'm not telling people to go out and drop F bombs all over the place, but if you let somebody else's choice of words dictate how you feel, and you get offended, number one, it may keep you from learning something that's going to be life changing for yourself.
Yeah.
But number two, your big deep seated issue is that you're giving other people all the control when you let somebody outside of you get that upset. And it's turned out to be the biggest thing. Even Jack Canfield, who was one of my, he's only the second person I had read the book. Most of you know who he is. You just don't know his name. He wrote Chicken Soup for the Soul, but he also wrote The Success Principles, and he was only the second person to read the book. And it was interesting because I was in an author retreat with him, and he's a brutal coach for such a sweet man. He's like, your story, he's telling other people, your story sucks. You got mistakes here. You really need to redo this whole thing. And he gets to me, I'm like number 7. And he's like, let's see, Kevin StClergy. Oh, right. Yeah. I stayed up till midnight reading your book. I loved it. It's going to be a classic. We just need to work on the marketing, which was a huge compliment. But then he goes, I even love your effing part. And I was like, oh my God, I just got the looking soup for the soul guy to say the F word, but it was really, really cool. So that's it. So you've got reflect. Is there something else going on that I can't see? Connect with somebody outside of your sphere of influence. I prefer paid coaches because people who pay attention on both sides. And then finally decide, make an effort decision. MFD, we call it, which has turned into this whole movement. We've got it on coffee mugs now. People are doing this on their own. I don't even have the swag yet. So yeah, reflect, connect, decide. And when you do that, everything changes.
Ah, amazing, amazing. I remember I was in to speak for one of your groups, which I appreciate. I remember you all talking about that and it was so memorable. I came back and I told my team about that. So
Yeah.
it's powerful. It's powerful and nothing happens in life until we make a decision to change and actually change something. So I think for everyone listening today, I know this has got them activated, thinking differently. They're probably thinking about the areas of business or sales or life where they keep having the same pattern repeat and they want to go deeper. They want to break it. They want to go through the method you just taught. So will you share with everyone, Kevin, where can they connect with you? Where can they get the book? Let's just have you share for a minute about how they can go deeper to actually apply this because this is a really brilliant framework.
Sure. Well, if you don't mind a free offer for your listeners, you can go to blindblaming.com, and I do give the audio version for free on the website. So you just log in, I have a weekly newsletter. We call it MFD Weekly.
Mhm.
And that's when I send out one story a week of a success story of somebody that's using the whole framework. And they're well written and they're a lot of fun. We like to say it's the most insight per story of any newsletter on the web. But it's MFD Weekly. So as long as you subscribe to that, you get the audio tape for free. If you'd rather have a book, it's available on my website as well. You'll see the book, $20. You can buy it on Amazon if that's the way you prefer, or you can buy it on Audible if you want. But again, the audio tape is free on the website. I also have an e-course, and we launched that at $47. It's just I want as many people as we can to listen to this and get the framework. So if you're not a big reader, get the e-course. It's just a little bit more. It's right there on the homepage. You can see it pretty easily in the navigation menu. Because our goal is simple. What we're trying to do is help 100 million people get to the root cause of a problem they can't seem to fix. And we think if we do that, in fact, we know if we do that, we'll not only have a positive effect or a ripple effect in their life and their business, but society as a whole.
Amazing. Amazing. Thank you so much. I loved this conversation. It's got me thinking differently too about, I mean, I do this work all the time, and this is a method that I've never heard before, a different approach that I think is really unique. So it's got me thinking differently about areas of my life where I want to go and apply it. So I really appreciate you, your insight. MFD, everyone's going to remember that and go apply it from here. So we will link everything in the show notes. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much, Kevin, for being here and for sharing your wisdom with the community. And to you, my listener, I want to invite you to go get Kevin's book, sign up for his newsletter, connect with the community, go deeper. This whole podcast, this whole group, this whole community is about helping you achieve your goals and create quantum leaps in all areas of life. And so, in closing, I want to thank you, as always, for being a listener of the podcast. And I want to remind you to trust yourself on your path to success. Remember that your desires are green lights leading you and everyone around you to a brighter future. I'll see you on the next episode.